As an entrepreneur, have you suffered this question as to what kind of an entity shall I start? Shall I start with a limited liability partnership and later graduate to a private limited company? Or shall I straight away jump into a private limited company? Or can I run the business like a sole proprietor and later decide? Today's video is to demystify the questions around this and help you to make a decision. So let's get started. What are the type of entities an individual can select? Now there are sole proprietorship, which is a individual's own business, partnership firms, which can be registered or unregistered too, limited liability partnerships, a company, a trust, even a society or a cooperative society. Now, for the purpose of ease, and since the focus of this video is to help you identify a suitable venture or a suitable entity to start your business, we will limit ourselves to a private limited company or an LLP or a firm or sole proprietorship. This video would not be explaining the pros and cons and the reasons why people select trust or a society or a cooperative society. So now, coming back to the point, would you like to start your business as a sole proprietor? Now, you would have seen dime a dozen jewelry shops to restaurants to bookshops who are running for generations, and people have been happy, people have been wealthy, people have been running their businesses. But is it a suitable model to take care of your startup journey? Let's look at its pros and cons. It's very easy to start a sole proprietor. You simply have to start. It's as simple as that. However, and it has no regulatory compliances except the taxation related filings, what an individual is anyway required to do. Whereas if you look at its cons or constraints, it greatly suffers from a challenge called unlimited liability. The business's identity is connected with the founder, and any business losses becomes the founder's personal responsibility, and he suffers from unlimited liability. So for any reason the business runs into losses, founder's personal assets can also be at risk. So would you like to start your startup journey with such a high risk hangover? Let's move on to the second kind of entity, a partnership firm. A partnership firm brings better flexibility and it has more manpower. You need to have another partner. So at least there are two individuals required to start a partnership firm. It brings flexibility. It also helps you to pool your resources. However, again, from a risk standpoint, this also suffers greatly. What are the risks? A partnership firm also suffers from unlimited liability. The only better part here is the liability can be jointly shared. Partners exit or partners disputes are a very messy subject, and this also brings a question mark on this structure's suitability to start business. As a startup, you would prefer to bring more and more people. You would prefer to incentivize your employees, your senior management, and in partnership, you might find it difficult to make them stakeholders in the firm. So, unlimited liability brings the same kind of risk what a sole proprietorship was suffering, and therefore this also does not become for starting up a venture. Now let's move to limited liability partnerships. Now this is a refined model of partnership, but here the liabilities are limited. That means that a founder's personal assets are not at risk. Business losses can only be recouped through the business profits or through insolvency methods, but personal assets of founders are not at stake. It does bring regulatory flexibility. You need to have, just like a firm, you need to have two partners and you can have your business. However, it suffers from one disadvantage compared to company, which is a disadvantageous tax structure. We will deal with it when we explain the company. So limited liability makes it a preferable choice, but a poor taxation structure makes this particular structure also not a very viable structure. Now there could be a question that we see so many companies or so many ventures starting as an LLP. Well, that's always right. As long as you are willing to forego the taxation benefits, an LLP can also fulfill your role. However, as a startup, if your choice is to go raise capital funding by way of equity infusion, a limited liability partnership may come as a roadblock in that stage too. So therefore, two specific hindrances affect this decision: a poor tax structure and inability to raise fund through equity infusion. Now let's move to our fourth and important part. Why not set up as a private limited company? Now before we decide, because it's a standard question and very easily answered by people, let's discuss and understand why it has become the most favorable kind of entity which everyone wishes to start. What are its benefits? It gives you protection from unlimited liability. A shareholder or a founder's liabilities are limited to the number of shares he or she has committed to purchase. It also has perpetual succession. By perpetual succession, we mean the business can go on irrespective of change or demise of a shareholder or a director. It can outlive its founders. Third, it does bring flexibility in raising capital, and it's a preferred model for venture capital to angel investors for funding. And fourth, it allows you to incentivize your employees, stakeholders. Now you must be knowing employee stock options, a favorite method in tech companies to incentivize their employees. LLPs or partnership firms doesn't have that flexibility where you can make an employee a shareholder, whereas Companies Act does provide that flexibility. Now what are its cons or constraints? It is a very known fact that companies are strictly regulated and have a greater compliance burden. Now coming back to the taxation structure. A company is definitely a better structure than an LLP from a tax standpoint, for the simple reason. An LLP, the applicable taxation rate is 30% plus surcharges, whereas for a company it could be 20 to 25% subject to a certain turnover level, and this clearly makes it the best vehicle from a taxation standpoint. So from a benefit standpoint, you get few benefits: limited liability, perpetual succession, better tax structure, and ability to raise fund as well as incentivize your employees. Whereas constraints are higher compliance burden. Now, while people do worry about compliance burden and related nitty-gritties or complicated legal stuff, I think there are enough advisors or service providers available who can help you ease that burden. In case as a founder you are planning to start an investment company or a lending company, then law makes it easy for you. Law prescribes that you must start a company. So certain businesses have certain regulatory requirements where a company structure is a preferred structure or a recommended structure, whereas in certain businesses both company or LLPs are allowed to set up the business. So please evaluate your businesses and take professional help if that requires. However, from a very standard point, a private limited company makes the best sense, and of course it comes with a higher compliance burden, but I think that's the benefits weighs much better than the constraint of higher compliance burden. I hope this video helped you to make a clear decision, and in case you have already set up a company, this video will give you the clear picture as to why a company was recommended to you for the best vehicle. Thanks, and hope you enjoyed this video.